On the morning of November 3, 2018, 42-year-old Gerald Bannister walked into the police station in Springfield, Missouri, and calmly reported that his wife was missing. He told the desk sergeant that 38-year-old Patricia Bannister had left their home 2 days earlier after an argument and had not returned. He said he had tried calling her cell phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. He claimed he was worried something might have happened to her. The officer taking the report asked routine questions. How long had they been married? 8 years. Did Patricia have any medical conditions? No. Did she have friends or family she might be staying with? Maybe, but Gerald said he had already checked, and no one had seen her. Had there been any recent problems in the marriage? Gerald paused before answering. He admitted that they had been fighting about money, specifically about a large sum that had recently gone missing from their joint account. The officer made note of the details and told Gerald that most missing person cases involving adults resolve within 48 hours, often when the person returns home voluntarily. He suggested that Patricia might simply need space and would likely come back once she cooled down. Gerald nodded but said something felt wrong this time. He insisted that Patricia would not just disappear without telling someone where she was going. What Gerald did not tell the officer was that Patricia was not missing. She was dead. Her body was wrapped in plastic sheeting and buried in a shallow grave in the woods behind their property. And Gerald had put her there himself, less than 36 hours earlier, after beating her to death in their garage. His motive was as simple as it was brutal. Patricia had spent money that Gerald believed belonged to him, and he had decided she deserved to die for it. Gerald and Patricia Bannister had married in 2010 after meeting at a manufacturing plant, where they both worked on the assembly line. Gerald operated machinery, and Patricia worked in quality control. They were not a particularly romantic couple, but they got along well enough and shared practical goals like owning a home and achieving financial stability. By 2015, they had saved enough for a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Springfield, in a neighborhood of aging ranch homes and overgrown yards. Money was always tight. Gerald earned approximately $42,000 per year, and Patricia made slightly less. They had no children, which helped keep expenses manageable, but they carried credit card debt and were frequently behind on utility payments. Both had grown up in working-class families and were accustomed to financial strain, but Gerald in particular harbored deep resentment about their circumstances. Friends later described him as someone who felt entitled to more than he had, and who frequently complained about others who seemed to have easier lives. In March 2017, Gerald's situation changed dramatically. He was involved in an on-the-job accident at the manufacturing plant when a piece of machinery malfunctioned, causing a metal component to strike his left hand. The injury resulted in the partial amputation of 2 fingers and permanent nerve damage. Gerald was placed on temporary disability leave and ultimately determined to be unable to return to his previous position. He filed a workers' compensation claim, which was approved after several months of review. In addition to the workers' compensation settlement, Gerald filed a personal injury lawsuit against the machinery manufacturer, alleging that a design defect had caused the malfunction. The case was settled out of court in January 2018 for $485,000. After legal fees and medical expenses were deducted, Gerald received a lump sum payment of $312,000 deposited directly into his bank account. It was the most money Gerald had ever seen in his life. For the first time, he felt financially secure. He talked openly about paying off the mortgage, buying a new truck, and possibly starting a small business. Patricia was equally excited, though her priorities were different. She wanted to pay off their credit cards, make home improvements, and set aside savings for emergencies. The couple agreed to deposit the settlement into their joint checking account and to make financial decisions together. For the first few months, they followed this plan. They paid off approximately $18,000 in credit card debt, made a $25,000 payment toward the mortgage, and purchased a used pickup truck for $12,000. But by summer 2018, cracks began to appear in their agreement about how to manage the money. Patricia Bannister had always been more social than her husband. While Gerald preferred to stay home and watch television, Patricia enjoyed going out with friends, attending community events, and shopping. After the settlement money arrived, Patricia's spending habits accelerated. She began purchasing new clothing, furniture, and home decor items. She took weekend trips with friends to Branson and Kansas City. She paid for dinners and drinks when she went out, often covering the bill for others in her group. Gerald noticed the increased spending, but initially said nothing. He assumed Patricia was simply enjoying the newfound financial freedom, and that her expenditures would level off. However, by September 2018, Gerald reviewed their bank statements and was shocked by what he found. In the 6 months since the settlement, Patricia had spent approximately $87,000. The purchases ranged from small transactions at retail stores to large payments for furniture, electronics, and travel expenses. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Gerald confronted Patricia, demanding an explanation for what he viewed as reckless and irresponsible behavior. Patricia responded that the money was in their joint account, and that she had as much right to it as he did. She pointed out that Gerald had also made purchases, including the truck and several expensive power tools. Gerald argued that his purchases were practical investments, while Patricia's spending was frivolous and wasteful. The argument escalated into one of the most heated confrontations of their marriage. Gerald accused Patricia of betraying him and squandering money that he had earned through his injury. Patricia countered that she had supported him emotionally and financially throughout his recovery, and that she deserved to enjoy some of the settlement. The fight ended with Gerald storming out of the house and Patricia retreating to the bedroom in tears. Over the following weeks, Gerald became increasingly obsessed with the missing money. He reviewed every transaction, categorizing Patricia's purchases and calculating the total amount she had spent. He created a spreadsheet documenting each expenditure and began demanding that Patricia account for every dollar. Patricia, feeling controlled and attacked, began hiding purchases and opening a separate credit card account that Gerald did not know about. By late October 2018, the financial situation had become the sole focus of their relationship. They barely spoke except to argue about money. Gerald told friends that he felt Patricia had stolen from him and that he would never forgive her. Patricia confided in coworkers that she felt trapped and that Gerald's anger was becoming frightening. One coworker later told investigators that Patricia had said, "I don't know how much more of this I can take. He looks at me like he hates me." On the evening of November 1st, 2018, Gerald and Patricia had another explosive argument about money. According to Gerald's later statements to police, the fight began when he discovered that Patricia had used their joint credit card to purchase a $200 designer handbag. Gerald confronted her in the living room, holding the credit card statement and demanding to know why she needed such an expensive item. Patricia told him it was none of his business and that she was tired of being interrogated about every purchase. Gerald's anger boiled over. He began shouting, calling Patricia selfish and accusing her of ruining their financial future. Patricia shouted back, telling Gerald that his obsession with money was destroying their marriage and that she regretted ever staying with him after the accident. The argument continued for nearly an hour, with both parties saying things designed to hurt the other. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Gerald told Patricia that he wanted her to leave the house. Patricia refused, saying it was her home too, and she had every right to stay. Gerald insisted, becoming more aggressive in his tone. Patricia, feeling threatened, grabbed her purse and car keys and headed toward the garage, intending to leave and stay with a friend for the night. Gerald followed her into the garage. What happened next would be reconstructed through forensic evidence and Gerald's own partial admissions. According to the timeline established by investigators, Gerald grabbed Patricia by the arm as she reached for the car door handle. Patricia tried to pull away, and the two struggled briefly. Gerald, significantly larger and stronger than Patricia, overpowered her and pushed her against the workbench along the garage wall. Patricia hit her head on the edge of the workbench and fell to the concrete floor. Stunned but conscious, she tried to stand. Gerald, in a rage, picked up a claw hammer that was sitting on the workbench and struck Patricia in the head. The first blow fractured her skull. Patricia collapsed, bleeding heavily. Gerald struck her 2 more times, ensuring she would not survive. The entire incident lasted less than 2 minutes. Gerald stood over Patricia's body, breathing heavily, as the reality of what he had done began to register. According to his later statements, he felt no immediate remorse, only panic about the consequences. He knew he needed to hide the body and create a plausible story for Patricia's disappearance. Gerald spent the next several hours working to conceal the crime. He retrieved plastic sheeting from the basement, the kind used for covering furniture during painting projects, and wrapped Patricia's body tightly. He used duct tape to secure the sheeting, ensuring that no blood would leak out. He then dragged the body to the back of the garage and covered it with a tarp and several boxes, intending to dispose of it after dark the following night when he would have time to dig without being observed. Gerald cleaned the garage thoroughly, using bleach to scrub the blood from the concrete floor and the workbench. He placed the hammer in a bucket of soapy water to remove any visible blood, then dried it and returned it to its usual place on the pegboard. He inspected the garage carefully, looking for any remaining evidence, and wiped down every surface Patricia might have touched. The following evening, November 2nd, 2018, Gerald waited until after midnight to move the body. He loaded Patricia's wrapped corpse into the bed of his pickup truck, covered it with a tarp, and drove approximately 3 miles to a densely wooded area adjacent to a state conservation property. He had scouted the location earlier that day and identified a spot far enough from any trails that it was unlikely to be discovered by hikers or hunters. Using a shovel, Gerald dug a shallow grave approximately 3 feet deep. The ground was hard and the work was exhausting, but Gerald continued until the hole was large enough to accommodate the body. He placed Patricia's remains in the grave, covered it with soil, and scattered leaves and branches over the site to disguise the freshly disturbed earth. He returned home around 4 a.m., disposed of the plastic sheeting and duct tape in a dumpster behind a shopping center, and went to bed. The next morning, November 3rd, Gerald went to the police station to report Patricia missing. His plan was to establish a timeline suggesting that Patricia had left voluntarily after an argument and had simply not returned. He believed that if her body was never found, he could eventually claim she had abandoned the marriage and moved away, leaving him free to access the remaining settlement money without interference. Detectives from the Springfield Police Department began investigating Patricia Bannister's disappearance on November 3rd, 2018, the same day Gerald filed the missing person report. Initially, the case was treated as a standard missing adult investigation. Officers contacted Patricia's known friends, family members, and co-workers to determine if anyone had seen or heard from her. They also obtained Patricia's phone records and attempted to ping her cell phone, but the device was either powered off or destroyed. Patricia's co-workers reported that she had not shown up for her shift on November 2nd and had not called in sick, which was unusual for her. Friends said they had not heard from her in several days, and her social media accounts showed no activity since November 1st. Patricia's sister, who lived in Joplin, told detectives that she had spoken with Patricia by phone on October 30th, and that Patricia had mentioned ongoing marital problems, but had not indicated any plans to leave town. Detectives conducted a formal interview with Gerald on November 4th. Gerald repeated his story that Patricia had left after an argument about money, and that he had not seen her since the evening of November 1st. When asked about the nature of the argument, Gerald explained that Patricia had been spending money irresponsibly, and that he had confronted her about it. He said the argument had been heated but not physical, and that Patricia had grabbed her purse and keys and walked out. Detectives asked Gerald if they could search the house and property to rule out the possibility that something had happened to Patricia at home. Gerald consented, appearing cooperative. Officers conducted a walkthrough of the residence, examining the garage, basement, and yard. They found no obvious signs of violence or disturbance. However, one detective noted that the garage floor appeared unusually clean, as though it had been recently scrubbed. On November 6th, detectives obtained a warrant for a more thorough forensic examination of the property. Crime scene investigators used luminol to test for the presence of blood in the garage. The chemical reaction revealed significant blood spatter on the concrete floor and along the base of the workbench, in a pattern consistent with a violent assault. Further testing confirmed that the blood was human and matched Patricia's blood type. Confronted with this evidence, Gerald maintained that he had no explanation for the blood. He suggested that Patricia might have injured herself in the garage at some point in the past, though he could not recall any specific incident. Detectives did not believe this explanation, and Gerald was arrested on November 7, 2018, and charged with second-degree murder. While Gerald was in custody, investigators focused on locating Patricia's body. They obtained warrants for Gerald's cell phone and truck GPS data, hoping to identify locations he had visited in the days after Patricia's disappearance. The GPS data showed that Gerald's truck had traveled to the wooded area near the state conservation property in the early morning hours of November the 2nd, remaining there for approximately 2 hours before returning home. On November 9, 2018, search and rescue teams, accompanied by cadaver dogs, were deployed to the area identified by the GPS data. Within 3 hours, the dogs alerted to a specific location approximately 200 yards from the nearest access road. Investigators began excavating and discovered Patricia Bannister's body buried in a shallow grave, wrapped in plastic sheeting and secured with duct tape. The medical examiner conducted an autopsy and determined that Patricia had died from blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with being struck multiple times with a heavy object. The examination revealed 3 separate impact sites on her skull, 2 of which had fractured the bone. The cause of death was determined to be traumatic brain injury, and the manner of death was classified as homicide. If you've been following along, hit the like button and let me know in the comments what you think happened here. With Patricia's body recovered and the cause of death established, prosecutors upgraded the charges against Gerald to first-degree murder, alleging that the killing had been premeditated and deliberate. Gerald was held without bond pending trial. Gerald Bannister's trial began in May 2019 at the Greene County Courthouse in Springfield, Missouri. He entered a plea of not guilty, and his defense attorney argued that Patricia's death had been the result of an accident during an argument that had spiraled out of control, and that Gerald had panicked and made poor decisions in the aftermath. The prosecution presented a compelling case built on forensic evidence, digital records, and testimony from Patricia's friends and family. Prosecutors argued that Gerald had killed Patricia in a fit of rage over the money she had spent, and that his actions after the murder, including cleaning the crime scene, burying the body, and filing a false missing person report, demonstrated consciousness of guilt and premeditation. The medical examiner testified that the nature and severity of Patricia's injuries were inconsistent with an accidental fall or an unintentional act. The 3 separate blows to her head indicated a sustained and deliberate attack. Crime scene investigators explained how the blood spatter pattern in the garage matched the prosecution's theory of the assault, and how Gerald's thorough cleaning efforts had been designed to destroy evidence. Patricia's co-workers and friends testified about her state of mind in the weeks before her death, describing her fear of Gerald's increasing anger and her concerns about their financial disputes. One friend recounted a conversation in which Patricia had said, "I'm afraid he's going to do something he can't take back." Gerald's financial obsession was also documented. Prosecutors introduced the spreadsheet Gerald had created tracking Patricia's spending, as well as text messages in which he berated her for individual purchases and demanded that she account for every transaction. The prosecution argued that Gerald had come to view Patricia not as his wife, but as an obstacle to his control over the settlement money. Gerald testified in his own defense, claiming that he had never intended to hurt Patricia and that the hammer blows had occurred during a moment of rage that he deeply regretted. He admitted to burying her body and lying to police, but insisted that the killing itself had not been premeditated. However, his testimony was undermined by inconsistencies and by the prosecution's cross-examination, which highlighted his deliberate efforts to cover up the crime. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before returning a guilty verdict on the charge of first-degree murder. Gerald showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read. Gerald Bannister was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing hearing, Patricia's sister delivered a victim impact statement in which she described Patricia as a kind and generous person who had deserved far better than the life and death she had experienced. She stated, "Gerald didn't just kill my sister. He destroyed her for money. That's all she was worth to him. Money he didn't even earn himself." The judge, in imposing the sentence, emphasized the brutality of the crime and Gerald's calculated efforts to avoid detection. The judge stated, "You murdered your wife because you believed she had wronged you financially. You then attempted to cover up your crime and deceive law enforcement. Your actions demonstrate a complete absence of remorse and a callous disregard for human life." Gerald is currently serving his sentence at the Jefferson City Correctional Center in Missouri. He has filed one appeal, which was denied. Patricia Bannister was buried in Springfield, and her family established a small memorial fund in her name to support victims of domestic violence. The remaining settlement money, approximately $174,000 at the time of Patricia's death, was awarded to Patricia's estate and distributed to her family. Gerald forfeited any claim to the funds as a result of his conviction under Missouri's Slayer statute, which prevents individuals from financially benefiting from the death of someone they murdered. The murder of Patricia Bannister is a stark reminder of how financial conflict can escalate into lethal violence when combined with obsession and a sense of entitlement. Gerald Bannister's belief that the settlement money was solely his, despite it being deposited into a joint account shared with his wife, drove him to commit a brutal act that destroyed 2 lives and devastated a family. Legal experts have noted that this case illustrates the importance of clear financial communication and boundaries in relationships, particularly when large sums of money are involved. Patricia's spending, while perhaps excessive, was not illegal and did not justify violence. Gerald's response, driven by rage and a desire for control, transformed a financial dispute into a homicide. For Patricia's family, the loss remains deeply painful. Her sister has spoken publicly about the importance of recognizing warning signs in relationships where financial conflict becomes abusive, and has advocated for resources to help individuals escape dangerous situations before they turn deadly. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like and subscribe for more cases like this. Let us know in the comments what you think about this case and where you're watching from today.